Nowadays we have a fantastic device, the Steam Deck. But who remembers the Steam machines? Back in 2015, Valve, alongside industry partners, released these Debian-powered Linux gaming boxes. Now, if you want to be technically correct, it was powered by SteamOS, but back then, SteamOS was based on Debian and not Arch Linux like it is today. This is where we got the cult favorite, Steam Controller. I have never actively used one myself, but I hear a lot of people absolutely swear by it. The only issue is the Steam machines, and Linux in general, didn't have any games, which is kind of familiar to another thing that released. The only difference with the PlayStation is the PS5 can play PS4 games, so you at least have that. Now, sure, it wasn't 0 games, but back then, they relied on games being ported to Linux. Proton didn't yet exist, so you were stuck with the few games being ported on Steam. There were obviously games that were like indie games that did support Linux. You could play free software games, or you could try your luck setting up Wine before things like DXVK existed. Back then, there were tools like Play on Linux. Lutris did already exist, but it was like relatively early days, and Wine just was not in the state that it's in today. You could do it, and people did. It was just way more effort than it is today. You couldn't just go into Steam, click play, and it just works. And as one should have expected, these did not sell very well, only selling a couple 100,000 units, which might sound like a lot, but in the context of a console-like device is basically nothing, and even just in the context of the PC gaming market is also basically nothing. But it did cause Valve to shift the focus in how they're going to handle Linux, and that's basically how we got Proton and allowed devices like this to actually make sense. But this was never going to be the end, and as of late, there have been some very interesting things coming out of Valve. Firstly, are the new Steam brand guidelines. Normally, this wouldn't really be that interesting, but a couple of things were spotted by outlets like Gaming on Linux. Firstly, is this right here. Powered by SteamOS, for hardware running the SteamOS operating system implemented in close collaboration with Valve. Now, obviously, for their own devices like the Steam Deck, they would want to go and use that branding, but that's not the interesting part. We know the Steam Deck is powered by SteamOS. This is a bit further down. The Powered by SteamOS logo indicates that a hardware device will run the SteamOS and boot into SteamOS upon powering on the device. Partners/manufacturers will ship hardware with a Steam image in the form provided by and or developed in close collaboration with Valve. Partners/manufacturers, as in people that are not necessarily involved at Valve that are possibly making a third-party device that is shipping SteamOS. Yes, there have always been projects like HoloISO, which have now been moved over to here, but this was always like a third-party way to get access to SteamOS if you wanted to go and try it out on some other thing, because Valve had not yet released an ISO to install it on another device. But we knew eventually this was going to be a thing that happens, and you wouldn't go and make these brand guidelines that companies could go and use SteamOS unless you actually were getting ready to actually get that released. We knew it was going to happen eventually, but we hadn't really heard anything from Valve about it. However, keep in mind, just like the Deckard, just because Valve seems to be doing something does not mean that they'll be doing anything anytime soon. You know, Valve time and all that. They could say it's gonna be out in 3 months, you know, and not having any sort of confirmation on a date or time. It's kind of up in the air. Actually, one fun thing about Valve time is they do mention it in the Valve developer documentation. So if you want to go and actually read some examples of this, somebody actually went through. Also, it is like actually up to date. So like, it's not an old thing that was made, you know, 5-10 years ago. No, this is still being actively maintained as a list. But also back in August, there was an interesting note in a SteamOS update, 3.6.9 beta. Right down the bottom here, added support for extra ROG Ally keys. So on the ROG Ally, there are these extra keys alongside the screen that you can just map to whatever you want. And yes, this could just be a Valve dev who happens to have an ROG Ally and wants to run SteamOS on it themselves, or this could be an intentional effort to make it so SteamOS can be effectively used on these other handheld devices. It's not entirely clear from this, it's just a one-off change, right? Like, this is not an announcement, this is speculation based on what we can see. Now, on that topic of things going on in SteamOS, as always, there has been some data mining on Steam, some data mining on SteamOS, and people are uncovering things that kind of point towards a new device, not necessarily a handheld device. Actually, judging by what we can see, it's probably not going to be one. It's probably going to be some sort of box, some sort of machine. One might say another take on the Steam machine, a device dubbed Fremont. Now, at this point, I am genuinely convinced that one of three things are true, and there can certainly be some overlap between these. One, Valve has absolutely zero data security because it seems like every other week there is some sort of new leak. I find that one kind of unlikely though, because we probably would have seen a lot more than we have. Right now we have like little bits and pieces that are like a taste of things being worked on. Two, like a lot of other companies that claim they don't do this, Valve leaves things out in the open because they know there are data miners, they know people are going to find things, so they just leave it there, just basically as free marketing, because anytime something is found, people are going to make videos about it, people are going to write articles, it's basically just free marketing. If they're going to announce it at some point in the future anyway, might as well just build up some hype before that. Or three, all of the leaks are just an elaborate joke because haha leaky Valve. Now, I would not be surprised if two of those are true. You can guess which two. So this was first spotted over on Reddit. Looks like Valve is working on a SteamOS device codenamed Fremont, maybe a standalone Steambox. What gave them that idea is this change over to the kernel, updating CEC endpoint for Fremont with a single line kernel change. Now, for anyone unaware what this repo is, this is a public mirror of Valve's repos for SteamOS, basically, because right now they don't actually have a public repo for it, so this is basically the best you get. This is a change made by a Valve employee. What does this tell us? What is CEC? This is the Chrome OS embedded controller driver. Now, because of that, some people are speculating, oh, I guess this is going to be a Chrome OS powered device, and yes, theoretically, I guess that could be the case. You could have like a modified version of Chrome OS that is SteamOS, so instead of being based on Arch, it's based on Chrome OS. Yeah, I guess. I find that kind of unlikely though. Also, this is just a open source microcontroller, and the framework laptops use a very similar idea as well, so that doesn't really tell us much besides that. It does tell us there is something they have that is called Fremont though. There is also reference to AMD Lilac. This is an AMD board platform. Now, if you go to Geekbench and search AMD Lilac, you will find a bunch of results, most of which are the 8540U. Keep in mind, AMD Lilac is a board platform, not a specific chip. Any numbers you see here do not indicate actual performance that a device like this would have. A lot of people are taking these numbers and saying, oh, it's gonna be this much faster than the Steam Deck, it's gonna have this performance. That's not what this is telling you. It's just whoever is doing this testing has it with an 8540U. Also, this is probably not testing from Valve, because why would they go and put all of their internal testing up on Geekbench? Also, it's from a Windows device. Again, if this is a device coming from Valve, I really, really doubt it's running Windows. From the entire list, there is one test here on Linux, and that is from over a year ago, and it's not even the chip that people seem to think is the chip that's going to be in this device. But this is not everything. We also have Brad Lynch on the case, who's been involved in various other Valve data mining efforts. This is how we found out about the Decard. AMD Lilac is likely the raw developer board provided by the platform that Valve planned to use until the first Fremont board finished. F7 is the identifier used for the firmware powering each Steam Deck. F7A, F7 Aerith, that became Jupiter / the LCD model. F7G, or Galileo, that became the OLED model. And then F7F, that is F7 Fremont, this new device that we're not entirely certain what it is. And this is really cool. All references to Fremont ensure checks for a full-size HDMI Type-A port you'd see on a TV-focused console and other desktop computers that don't have a dedicated GPU with its own HDMI ports. So, if you want to go and do display out on the Steam Deck, this is done over USB-C. This is probably the best indication that this is some sort of home console, PC, Steam machine-like device. Adding further to that, Valve Fremont cannot be a dock. The information that Fox found for us specifically notes the full-size HDMI port is hardwired to the host GPU directly, not connected through USB-C. And again, the GPU in this case would be built into the AMD APU, of course. Also keep in mind, we're not that long after the Valve Ibex models data mined the potential new Steam controller. This is very clearly based on what they've done with the Steam Deck. I don't know if it's going to be a good controller. I don't know if it's actually going to look like this if and when it does exist. But I'm very intrigued to see how something like this would actually feel. And yes, it would be cool just to make a controller by itself. But, like, you're not really going to use it with the Steam Deck because unless you got it docked and then you're using it plugged into a TV, which I guess is a legitimate use case for it, you don't need a standalone controller because the controller is built into the device. But the last time we saw Valve make a controller, like a regular gaming controller, is when they last did a standalone machine. Also, just for the fun of it, I like to call this controller the, Uwu controller because look, it's adorable. Alongside this, we also have the model for the Decard's controllers, the Roy, which, look, they are VR controllers. Are they exceptional? You know, in my mind, they're basically all the same thing. And to top everything off, Valve, Decard, and Roy, Steam Controller 2, and this new Fremont device all at once. It reminds me of when Valve showed off the crazy Steam universe of hardware products at GDC 2015. 10-year anniversary of that is next year. You know, it would be very interesting if we saw a revival of that concept 10 years after the fact. 10 years after the fact, but done in a much more productive way, where people actually, you know, want to play games on Linux because it works now, because there are games to play on Linux. Maybe this is just extreme hopium and copium, and look, very possibly it is. But look, let a nerd dream. I want it to happen, please. I would probably buy a Steam home console. I think that'll be really, really cool. Hopefully it becomes a thing. We'll see more about it. Maybe we get a 3D model of it at some point. And if that happens, I think we can pretty much say it's actually going to happen, or at least really being considered. But what do you think? Do you think this is a giant nothing burger? Do you think something is actually being worked on here? And if something is, are you interested? I'd love to know. So if you liked the video, go like the video. And if you really liked the video and you want to become one of these amazing people over here, check out the Patreon, subscribe to Rebirth, linked in the description down below. That's going to be it for me, and what's your favorite Steam device or your favorite Valve device? Let me know.
like this.